ఇందాక నేను పోదామన్నా అనిపిస్తుంది.
Herzlich willkommen and welcome to today's Habibi Kiosk, The Right to be Cold. Today we're going to be talking about ecology, indigenous rights, culture and climate justice, and about how climate change fundamentally challenges and changes living conditions in the north, in the northern regions. The title from today's Habibi Kiosk comes from a Goethe-Institute project, which is a joint project between the Goethe Institutes in Helsinki, Montreal, Novosibirsk, and Oslo. And part of this project were artist residencies, and two of these artists are here with us today. So there's Svetlana Romanova, who was born in Yakutsk in Russia and studied visual arts in Los Angeles. She moved back to Siberia in 2015, where she worked on several film projects in her hometown and the regions around it. And in the films, she sheds light on the living conditions of two indigenous groups that she belongs to. Then also with us today is Niap, who is currently in Montreal.
We can't hear you.
And can't hear yet? Okay, we're working on it. And she's based in Montreal, and she works as a multidisciplinary artist, investigating her cultural heritage as an Inuit woman through painting, performance, sculpture, and photography. And then next to me today is the only researcher who's part of the discussion today, Lena Schlegel. She's a researcher at the Rachel Carson Center for Environment and Society, and in her doctoral project, she focuses on the role of human-nature relations for climate inaction in the context of the Australian Black Summer. And now we just have to work out how we can all hear each other. Can you hear me yet?
I can hear you now.
Perfect. Okay. Hopefully Niap can hear me too when she's...
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. I just introduced the two of you.
Yes, we got the half of that.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so I'd be very interested to hear from the three of you. Tell us a bit about yourselves, the communities that you come from, and your field of work. Who wants to start? Maybe Svetlana, you go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm an artist. Currently I'm located in Yakutsk, which is in Russia. I work closely with Evan and Saha communities. I kind of multi-ethnic, I guess, in that sense. I come from two indigenous groups. My dad is of Saha and my mom is of Evan. My line of work deals mostly with sort of like idea of like self-directed ethnography and the video work. And I use video as a tool sort of to like talk about pending issues within our communities and to sort of like create like a video database because it's very sparse. It does not literally exist. And to sort of like revive what the idea of national memory and the idea of creation of information of indigenous identity at this day and age.
And where are you at the moment? Where are you calling
Right
from?
now in Yakutsk, yeah.
Okay. And yeah, Niap, tell us about yourself and your community and your field of work.
So my name is Nancy Saunders. I go by Niap as my artist name, I guess. I'm originally from northern Quebec, a region called Nunavik. I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I work with painting, drawing. I like working with sound, carving, and most of my work is to kind of reclaim, identity and kind of put Inuit on the map, Inuit of my region on the map, and try to, work on pride and reaffirmation, I guess. That's who I am.
Thank you. And Lena, what about you?
Yeah, my name is Lena Schlegel. I come from Germany. I speak from a privileged perspective, I guess, in that I am a white middle-class woman who is able to do a PhD at a renowned research institution. And I'm really interested in the problematic ideas we have in Western societies about human-nature relationships and how that influences the ways we approach environmental problems, how we can try and solve them, and also how we can facilitate justice with respect to these problems. I'm working on I'm really interested in questions of materiality, emotions, and care, and how they can be put more into focus when we look at environmental problems.
And before we go into more detail about your work, we will watch a few minutes from the trailer of one of Svetlana's movies. Enjoy.
Yani cehir var, ırak, dondurga, ırak, ırak. Onu bulanı kühütten tabandan baran ol üddü hayattan tavalar bütün hırka keçer bayan bir hırkanı giden kehbit allara. Ondan bebek bulanı hatıyı tühebit. Onu üddü şirki olur bu put. Onu balağan gelekbet. Onu küye sorunna. Ol balağanga türebitleri de bırakları meğen. Onu gehe ol onu olurum onu ol bulturete papam onu. Tavalar kolay gidecek bağay. Ol onu ol. Onu ben o haspıtta balağını mukalabıtım. O mahsurka bıraktım minne horep şeynyeli. Tığınca toğuz tüyüsü, tüyücün toğuz sılaka kuma hottan kühüge ıttılar. Onu köhügü vallana tümeti geçirki gittiler. Irak da olak tuğundara cek Irak erge. Ama göğsüne bir geldi bari onu eder içetler elbette onu o tümeti gel. Onda bari onu 15 taktır, 105 taktır. Ona varamıtti. İki turdağına varan ol muara kuti olunca onda iki brigada bolunca balık taati bitir sırasına. Filipten ubu kala kalır. Ona o çihorolara bot. Ona çihorolar bu pollana. Asta tuakta huak. İki balığı tuzku bukuya hiyetçi bit. Lepeskene gitti. Lepeskel dinatçı. Hasta da ki ya da mukalatçı bit. Burut olana hapakı da huak. Motor da tuakta huak. Babarte ilüyle tabi tönüyte.
So Svetlana, maybe tell us a little bit more about the film you made and the community you come from.
Sure. I lived with herders for a year. This is the little herd group from my mom's village, hometown. And I recorded literally the whole year, like sort of like I was obsessed with the idea that there's very little footage of what our current traditional industries look like, right? Like a very factual one, because all we get is usually like a footage from like a winter or like, I don't know, they're usually like very romanticized and shown as this like noble people, right? And here it's like literally goes through the whole period of like a very hard work. And I really wanted to showcase that, but it also in combination with my grandma's stories about her life. So it became sort of like, it's two films in a film. And first part of the film deals with sort of the idea like of change and how you can trace it. And there's like old VHS tapes and photographs, and it traces Kusur from 1930s up until now. And you can see that nothing, like not much has changed, even in the infrastructure. And the fact that she figured out what money was, like even the idea of currency that was introduced to her like late in the 50s. So I guess through those stories, you learn a lot about sort of like the injustices Indigenous people had faced and how little bit of help there has been and how much the image of them has been utilized to sort of create this idea of like, you know, even during the USSR, that there's like a unity and like prosperity, which is obviously not very true.
Yeah, I thought it was a very fascinating moment later in the trailer when I guess your grandmother talks about how she was suddenly handed this paper and then she realized, it's money. It's actually, I can do something with this. So you said that not so much has changed, but now is climate change already being felt in your community? Because that, of course, at some point will change a lot of things.
Right. I mean, I had witnessed it while I was working alongside with the herders in the summers, as you know, we experienced crazy wildfires in here, and migrations route changed, not only because of wildfires, but also because the amount of land that you get to use for the pastoral practices is very limited, right? And because of that, you've been using this land for generations, and the deer develops sort of like different diseases that are like due to the fact that you're pretty much in the same land, but also because some places become unpassable because the waters get a little bit crazier because there's like less ice, or sometimes there's like more snow and stuff like that. But the way people talk about it is not necessarily like they, I don't think they necessarily like to call it climate change. They just like to say the things that they are, right? So they very like, in their studies, they observe and then they comment. And there's definitely a feeling that there's something going on. Yeah, but there's obviously no like open topics or sources where you can tap in and be like, this is climate change. And when you approach them with that, they're just like, oh, that's just like a TV propaganda, right? So it's very hard to sort of like start this sort of a conversation where you try to separate this idea that has media created of what is global warming is and climate change is, and connect it to the traditional knowledge of people being just like, oh, there's like very weird stuff is happening around.
Yeah, Nia, but when we spoke before today, you also told me that climate change isn't really spoken about. but felt in some way. So yeah, maybe tell us, like, have you seen the effects of climate change in your community, and what is the discourse on it?
So from a community of 2,500 people, and where, you know, education is not the priority, it's not something that we talk about, it's not something that we're aware of. I mean, I don't think my people are aware that it's a conversation that people are having. But like Svetlana said, that we see changes. The land is more unpredictable. Growing up, I remember in October we used to have a ton of snow, and today I'm 35. We don't have as much snow as I used to. What I used to know when I was growing up 10, 11, 12 in Nunavik. But yeah, it's not something that we talk about. It's not something that we're worried about because we don't have really the luxury to worry about it. We have a lot more things going on, just as in, day-to-day survival. Where am I going to sleep? What am I going to eat? Because there is like food insecurities happening in my region. There's housing insecurities. People are, there's this mistrust with education and, with colonial history. So I feel like it's a luxury to be able to, talk about the world and worldly things and things that are happening, globally. To me, that's kind of like a luxury where that my people don't really have, if that makes sense. Yeah, we struggle a lot more about day-to-day survival issues,
Yeah, totally. And maybe also because it's like a foreign-sounding concept that doesn't come from within the community. But still, many indigenous communities have this very special relationship to the land. Like many traditional crafts are related to the land. It's a different conception, a different worldview on what nature means and what culture and humans mean. Can you maybe talk about that also within your communities? How is it conceived of differently, what humans are and what nature is, that relationship?
We see land as, something we are a part of, something that is, bountiful to feed us, and something that we have to kind of take care of and respect. There's like certain rules that we have to follow in regards to hunting and, fishing, or when we go out on the land to pick eggs. There's certain, rules we have to follow, like not to hunt caribou during the mating season, or if we come up to a nest with eggs, not to pick all of them, but to pick a few of them, just, to ensure the continuity. And we don't see it as something that we can profit off of. It's a part of who we are, and we kind of try to respect that, and a lot like centuries of traditions that we keep to, to ensure its perpetuity, like to ensure its continuity. Whereas, there's minds coming into my region who, want to destroy everything. Well, they don't want to destroy anything. I don't think that's, I just think that they come in with disregard to the importance of the land to us. They don't see water sources as, something that's, profitable, or land that's something, they don't see it as important to us. So, what's important to them is the minerals, and that's all that they're, going for. And that's negatively impacting our land and our resources, what we live off,
So it's not just it's a bigger environmental crisis, not just about climate change, but also about how the land is treated locally by external people as well, I guess.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Svetlana, do you also want to talk about that point, like that relationship between people and land?
I think
balance?
there's also like a very like a sentiment of like a hereditary past and understanding of like the knowledge of and relationship to the land. There's also, I think, maybe a problem in the semantics because like when people say like nature and humans, it's just like it sounds very foreign to me a little bit because nature, we don't, our relationship to nature is not just like, oh, it's like it's a concept of nature, right? We live in it and it's part of us. We're within that environment. And it feeds us, obviously, and we do also, like similar to Nancy, we do have rituals when you hunt, when you go gather berries, like for everything pretty much when you're out there. And it's very hard to sort of like understand it as a foreign concept that is beyond your body because your body and the land seem very similar, right? I don't know. It's just like, I guess, yeah, it's just like, it's somehow like
You can't
within
dissociate.
us. Yeah.
Yeah, we have all these kind of weird artificial separations, like how we go, I really miss nature. I want to go into nature, like where we are or who we are is non-nature, and then we go into nature. So yeah, Lena, you work on that. That's exactly your topic. Human-nature relationships, and you also look at why there's so much inaction on climate change, which might also be related to that separation between nature and non-nature, I guess. Yeah, maybe you can explain that a little bit further. Why do you look at that? Why is that so important? And why has it also reached academia that that is a problem?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think these descriptions already highlight some very important differences that in the Western world, or the so-called Global North, we draw a lot of binary distinctions between nature and culture, between the body and the mind. We separate emotion and cognition. And all of our societies are really built upon these distinctions. And I think a point that has been neglected a lot in approaches to societal change with regard to climate change and other ecological problems is the fact that change doesn't happen only on a structural level, but it also change is also related to cultural propositions, to the social relations that we have, social norms, the kinds of values that we have that underpin our social interactions. And so the kinds of paradigms that we have in the Western world have very much focused, allowed us to focus on a very techno-scientific approach to societal transformation. But it has,
what does that mean, techno-scientific?
So yeah, basically we know a lot of the underlying scientific facts about climate change, right? We have very deep knowledge about the Earth systems, and we also have a very very good technologies at hand to be more energy efficient and to have sustainable ways of producing electricity, for instance. But these questions are obviously not the only thing that matters to enable that change, because we have all the tools at hand already, but the change is still not happening. So I am thinking that we are missing some important points. And I think one of them is that change is really makes people are scared of change, obviously. Change is scary. And to imagine other ways of living is not so easy, especially because we have a very linear way of thinking about the future in the Western culture, because we tend to think about the future as the continuance of the past and in relation to past experiences. And that is why I really think we need to look out and have conversations with others who have other ideas of living, because the way of life in the societies of the Global North is simply not feasible, because it externalizes the negative effects of a way of life that sees nature purely as a resource into other areas of the world, into other communities, into the future. And also this causes a lot of injustice, because it interacts with other forms of discrimination, and it diffuses the responsibility for a particular way of life.
And I guess maybe also this disconnect between us and nature kind of makes us forget that we're dependent on, I don't want to say nature, but our environment.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even further, we are part of nature, but also nature is part of us, right? This is why we tend to speak about non-human nature, to enforce that humans are actually not separable from nature. We have millions of bacteria living in us that actually enable us to live. So that just as an example to show how artificial this distinction really is. And that these relationships with non-human others are essentially what allows us to live. So we should also think about how we can make these relationships, design these relationships in a way that fosters all life, not just human life.
And I guess this discussion or like challenging these divisions has become quite popular in academia. And I think also looking at indigenous communities and taking inspiration from them and their worldview has also become quite popular, which on the one hand is of course amazing and a really good thing, but you already told me it's also problematic, or it can be problematic to some extent. So yeah, is that a sign of like, yay, we're decolonizing academia, we're taking other knowledge systems seriously, or is there also like a darker side or a problematic side to it?
Yes, definitely both. I mean, it is great that we are starting to look out to other knowledges, but there is also obviously a great danger of appropriating knowledge and incorporating knowledge in Western academic discourses without giving credit to the communities and the people that have developed these ideas like thousands of years earlier. And also not to pay attention to the needs and the political struggles of those people and communities behind those ideas. So I think you already said decolonizing academia. I think this is really what we have to do alongside with talking about indigenous knowledges. We really have to make an effort to really decolonize academia and to really address those inequalities, the epistemic violence behind who is able to produce knowledge, who is able to speak up, and what kind of knowledge can be expressed.
Yeah, absolutely, because we're also in a situation where indigenous knowledge and knowledge systems and worldviews are all the rave, but at the same time, Western history, Western colonialism also stripped these people from their own knowledge and alienated them from, that's what you told me, Niap, alienated them from their own environment, their own culture. So yeah, it seems like we also have to look at these power struggles. Yeah, so I wanted to ask the two of you, like, first, maybe you want to comment on that, and then afterwards I want to ask you about initiatives, indigenous initiatives that are trying to, reclaim that knowledge and that heritage. But first, maybe Nia, can you tell us like the difficult situation that your community also is in?
I mean, I find it, like you were saying, it's great that we're trying to, get these this knowledge out with from like indigenous people, and try to learn from us and so on. But what I find kind of unfair is that we're still in this situation where, we're not a people who are striving. We're not a people who are doing very good. There's so much problems in my region that I can only speak for my region. I've been to Greenland, I've been to Nunavut, and I kind of see these problems kind of everywhere, but I can only speak for my region, and we're not doing good at all. There's so much intergenerational trauma that comes from colonialism. There's so much, hate towards our own people, hate towards certain ways of living. There's also pride. I mean, pride is coming back slowly and, very strong, but my people are suffering and they don't even know why. There's alcoholism, there's drug abuse, there's, incarcerations, missing and murdered Indigenous women. And we're just struggling as a people, and there's no real help that's happening. And I understand that in order to be able to help someone, like, you have to want to help yourself, and I get all that, but I just feel that there's a lot of programs happening, but it's just too little. And to say, oh wow, like, being Indigenous is so great, and your knowledge is so deep, and where you guys come from is amazing, and your land is so inspiring, and all this, but at the same time, there's transient workers that come to the north without knowing colonial history, and they just kind of come and take for their own experience and then leave us with these issues that are so deep. And a lot of people don't even know why they're suffering. They don't know why their parents are the way they are. They don't know why their grandparents are the way they are. And it's just a lack of, I don't know, it's, education is something that's very important. I know that when I started educating myself on colonial history and, just education in general, when I furthered my education, I kind of realized, wow, I now understand my mother, I understand my grandmother, where they come from. And, I was able to kind of make peace with my past and move forward towards healing. And healing is something that's so important right now. We need to heal to be able to strive and kind of move forward and, regain our independence. But I feel like there's so much. I mean, there's so much that needs to be done, and we're in a time where, like, it's paramount. I mean, there's with climate change and political relations and things that are going on around the world, it's affecting us, and we don't have any idea about it, and we're just struggling day to day with our own, like, I don't want to say small, but our own world, with our own individual problems. And it's if you look deeper, these individual problems kind of, it is a collective problem, and it needs to be taken care of. I mean, things have to change. This is like completely unacceptable.
And what do you think about Canadian discourse? Because this year there was also, even in the German news, there was a lot of talk about these boarding schools where many Indigenous children were abused, some of them killed as well. So did that maybe start more of a self-critical, self-reflective discussion on what has been done to Indigenous communities and how to, do something about it today to support the communities?
I mean, this is the children that were recovered. This is something that many people have been saying for many, many, many years, and nobody really acknowledged it until they had to, because their bodies were found, So it's not something. I mean, it's just something that we've been fighting for a really long time, and I can understand. It's such a complicated subject that that can take hours and hours of discussion, but there's this kind of animosity between non-Inuit and Inuit people, and there's this frustration between the two. And I say that education is key, and we need to get more educated on our own issues and our own intergenerational trauma. However, there's this animosity and this reluctance to education because of the history. So it's kind of like just turning in circles, and eventually something's gonna have to give. I don't know, in my opinion. So yeah, there are programs that are happening, and there's things that are being done, but very, very, very slowly. Because, I mean, there's this, I don't know who said this, but an educated native is a dangerous native. When we find out we have rights, we're gonna we're going to ask, we're going to say this is unjust. And so I think it's a good thing to keep us, uneducated and unaware of what's going on in order to what's the word I'm looking for? Somebody help me.
Keep the status quo, in a sense?
Yeah, keep the status quo and to continue profiting off of us, And so it's nothing real is being done. There's small little programs in my region that are going on, and they do help.
And you do something as well.
What's that?
You also do a lot with your art, and we're going to look at some of your art.
And I'm trying, I'm trying to. I'm very fortunate to have this platform to be able to, through my art, talk about issues that are that are very important to me, so like discussions like this one, and when I have shows or when I have exhibitions, I always go back to, talking about our social issues and what I think would be the key to kind of get us out of this rut we're in,
Thank you so much. Svetlana, what about your community? What is the situation there? Is it also there that you have this daily fight for survival, in a sense, or for healing, that tackling climate change is kind of ambitious?
I mean, site of like the Republic of Sahai Korea is huge, right? And we have different indigenous communities up in here. And obviously one of the main ones that is represented and is the big is Saha community, and they're pretty advanced, right? There's definitely a dialogue happening. They're very much so I don't know how to say this, but first of all, I think we have to it's hard enough because we have to talk about sort of how this ethnic groups, there's intertribal relationship, obviously, and there's obviously unspoken hierarchy happening. And a lot of the people who live in the city, let's say, don't understand what is happening up north. And the situation up north is devastating. Obviously, there's no stable internet connection. People literally use a satellite internet, which is no good. There's a shortage of jobs, and you literally have to go hunt your food still, so to say. And there's a housing problem. And I mean, a lot of social stuff obviously is happening. And with the culture, I would say there's a lot, there's the point where I start questioning the authenticity, because how much of what we practice now as our native culture, how much of it has been generated as it, or is a residue of of the Soviet times, right? Because up until 96, I want you to know that we were banned from practicing our language and culture. So a lot has been erased. And during the Soviet times, a lot has been presented in a very different way. So we are going through, I would say, very particular ethnogenesis, where through in some sense, maybe even through self-exotification, we're trying to sort of truly find and identify ourselves. And there's obviously a lot of local ethnographers who are working hard and trying to sort of write papers and participate in the global conversation about what is an indigenous ethnicity that is living here, how did we come here, what is what, and it's very complex. I mean, you have to understand that there are layers and layers, and there's very different social and economic sort of backgrounds where humans are coexisting within this realm, right? So I would say there's not one particular problem. It's just very complex.
Yeah, super complex, because you also can't just go back to before colonization or before your language and your culture was forbidden, because you just can't. You also live a different life and other things have happened. So it's super, super complex, but maybe we'll look at some of Niap's art now, which deals with these issues.
Just to come back to what you just said, I mean, we can't go back. And this reminds me of a comment that I heard from my grandmother when I was younger. I remember her sitting on the floor sewing, and she was weeping. And I asked her, what's the matter? What happened? And she says, oh, I'm just thinking of my past life. And you know, how I grew up and how I'm missing our way of life. However, you know, I would never ask this, you know, ask to go back, because I know that my children and my children's children will never know the feeling of real hunger. And, you know, that just, I was too young to kind of understand that. But so I find it kind of so contradicting, you know, this desire that we have of, you know, living a traditional life, but I also this need for living in modern times, otherwise we'll just sink, you know. You know, I don't know. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, totally. That ambivalence, absolutely. Yeah, and is that the grandmother that you painted or drew that we're going to see now? Is that the same woman?
This well, I don't know which image it is, but
yeah, could we show the image, the first one? Gonna see it in a second, hopefully.
Oh, that's my great grandmother.
Yeah, could you tell us a bit about that drawing?
So
painting?
This was this was work from my first solo exhibition, and it was, you know, to kind of celebrate tattooing and celebrate tradition and reclaim tradition. And so the idea here was to give to my great grandmother what she never had a chance to have. She was never tattooed because tattooing was banned, and so I wanted to symbolically give her back something that she had never had a chance to do. And so I did this drawing. It's bigger than life size, and I sewn the tattoos on the portrait, and it was really just symbolically to kind of celebrate, because, you know, we talk about our frustrations towards you know, colonial history and the church and all this like negative that's happened, but we rarely talk about, you know, what we've lost, and we rarely celebrate what we lost. So rather than focusing on the negative things that happened to us, I wanted to celebrate what we have. And, you know, tattooing is coming back very strongly, which is, you know, more and more women in my community have facial tattoos. They're tattooing their thighs and their arms and their chests again, and it's coming back. So that was the idea behind it. I wanted to symbolically give her back what she never had a chance to get. And I got a lot of praise for this work, but I also got a lot of, you know, hate also. There's a lot of people in my family who are still very religious. And I have people in my family that don't talk to me anymore because of this. They were against the idea of me tattooing my great-grandmother, even if it was through portrait. And I did it anyways, and people from my family decided not to speak to me anymore.
And by religious, you mean Christian?
Yeah, we have in my community, it's Anglican. People are, you know, or Christian. It's all the same thing.
And maybe we'll also show a second one of your projects. Mm-hmm. Could we show it now?
Do we have the stone with the blue stone one? Do we have the image of the three with the pedestal?
We just have this one. Maybe you can describe it to us.
So this idea was to kind of celebrate throat singing, which is something that was banned also by the church. And we would secretly throat sing, and it started coming back in the 70s, 80s, and now a lot of people do throat sing. A lot of people don't. My grandmother didn't throat sing. My mother doesn't throat sing, but I do, and I learned it when I was, 18, and it's something that I'm very proud of. So this idea was to kind of materialize throat singing. I wanted to see what throat singing would look like if it had form, physical form. So I had 3 carvings, 3 stones, and each stone represented throat singing. And I recorded throat singing, and I also overlapped that with the element the throat song represents. So the one that the throat singing we heard was the river, and so I recorded sounds of the river, and I kind of made throat singing live with the element it represents, and it's something that you listen to when you get to the carving. So I want to. It's a very complex.
What is the significance of throat singing? When was it done? What's the meaning of it?
So throat singing is something that's done between 2 women. It was a way of passing time. It was a competition also, and it's basically representations of sound of nature. So there's the wind, the river, dog sledding, the mosquito, because we have a lot of those where I'm from. And it's basically 2 women echoing the same sound, and it gives this effect, like the saw, for instance. You'll have one woman do one sound and the other woman repeats, and it gives the echo effect and the sound effect of like the saw. And back then, traditionally it was done for pastime. Also, it was something that was done to, it was a real competition to see who can last the longest and who has the biggest repertoire of sounds that you could do with your throat. And it would be, like something that people would do to kind of win, let's say, a thimble. We would put it on the, there and say, okay, whoever wins this round will win the thimble. It was, and now today we use it for entertainment. A lot of people incorporate it in like modern music. And I do sometimes throat singing workshops here in Montreal, or I'll do presentations with throat singing to gatherings or, award ceremonies.
So I guess all this is part of a new development, a new movement to reconnect with some traditions, bring some of them back. Svetlana, what is happening in your region? Like, is there also a movement amongst young people to bring certain things back, maybe also traditional crafts or techniques or knowledge? Are there voices in politics? What is happening where you are?
Well, I would say there's a mixture of people sort of, how do you say, not experiencing, but voicing or practicing their traditional stuff, but reappropriating it to the times. So there's a huge punk movement in here. There's like punk in native languages and stuff. A film movement, a huge film movement where people try to sort of like reinforce cultural values through the stories and narratives, I guess.
Amazing. So going back to the other topic of our talk today, climate change. So we already said a couple of times, like if the environment changes, of course, what happens to indigenous knowledge, what happens to indigenous culture that is so connected to seasons and certain kind of environments. So what do you think is going to happen then? Will indigenous communities adapt, or will the culture be lost, or what do you think is going to be? Svetlana?
I think taking into the consideration that in the Arctic you always have to adapt, we'll probably find a way to adapt. But losing the land or the sort of like the amount of that you can actually use or be in means that you're actually going to lose the spaces to sort of I don't know how to say it, to practice your culture, I guess. And we can see that it's happening also because of the climate change, but it is affecting climate change. There's a lot, obviously, factors of like mining and like other resource, sort of like industrialization, right? That is like grasping a lot of land and is affecting climate and environment specifically.
Thank you. And Niab, what do you think is going to happen where you are? Because you also said in the phone call we had before how you go out into the land to like get inspired and to experience healing as well. And what happens if that environment is not there anymore or changes dramatically? What do you think is going to happen to the culture?
It's really hard to say, but I mean, Inuit were very resilient people. We're very, I mean, our adaptability has been showcased, and like Lana said, I mean, we're going to figure out a way to adapt, but I can't help but see a very negative impact to that. If we did lose our land, I don't know then what it would mean, to be Inuk. And then this is a question that we ask about. What does it mean to be Inuk? If I'm someone living in the South, I don't go hunting, I don't go berry picking, I don't sew, or I don't, if somebody doesn't speak the language, what does it mean? So, I mean, I have a positive view on it. I think we'll very much adjust, and but I'm hoping that it doesn't come to that.
We're almost at the end of our conversation, and I want to end on a more positive or proactive note, in a sense, and ask you, what do you think can be done? Like you both said that your communities don't really speak of climate change that much yet, just because it's, for lots of different reasons, changes are seen, but there's no political mobilization against it, for example. Like, does that have to happen? Do indigenous communities that from all around the world, do they have to connect to mobilize, or is it something that you do within your communities? What is your personal role in it as well? And before you answer that question, I just want to also ask Lena, because in her research, she talks about what she calls the sociology of care within that framework. What do you mean by that, and how can a sociology of care help us to become more active about climate change?
Yeah, basically it's the approach that I take to better understand inaction on climate change, in spite the overwhelming knowledge about it. It's an approach that comes from feminist ethics, even though a lot of similar ideas definitely persist much longer in indigenous contexts. It's basically starting from the assumption that life consists of relationships, and that not only human relationships are significant, but also relationships with nature. And that conflicts like climate change can be understood as a conflict of interests or needs between participants of these relationships. And so it's an attempt to shift the focus of our attention from structures or from debates about actors or structures, or what abstract determining causes are for social patterns, to looking at these relationships and shifting the focus of attention to the question, how can we appropriately respond to others and their needs, and to look at contextual solutions, and to look at practices and how these relationships are embodied, and how we can enable change by thinking about how we can reconfigure our webs of relations. And I think it's really useful also to bring back into our realms of attention, and also to back into our realms of responsibility, those others that we have externalized so far from the Western societies, and really feeling those relations that exist even across large distances or into the future, and really bringing back the responsibility for these changes into our realms of attention and responsibility.
So care work, not just for the nuclear family, but
yes,
for non-humans as well, and for our whole environment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds really fascinating. Sounds really good. Yeah. What about the two of you? What do you think can be done, and how do you see your role in it? Yep.
I'm a very concrete, action-oriented woman, and I don't make things very complicated. I try to kind of, I'm a straightforward kind of person, and I really believe that, humans, in like very urban places, I find that there's this huge disconnect towards what's real and what's important, and this relation with like consumerism and material belongings, and this, I feel like we kind of have to, once we let all of these like superficial layers go and kind of focus on what's real, then I think, but it would take a huge wake up for a lot of people, mostly for the youth that I find that are, so completely disconnected with where anything comes from and where they live. And so I think people just have to kind of reconnect, to like take in, like, realize who they are and what they're, who they are in the world and what's more important. But that's very idealistic of me to say that. So I'm gonna let Svetlana say something.
Yeah, I don't think I have a concrete answer to that. It's very difficult.
Yeah, it is very difficult to answer.
Yeah, I think there's a lot need to be done just for the people to sort of understand and gain the feeling of agency, right? Especially within our communities, that their voices are legit and they can be legitimized worldwide too. And that's a lot of work. And I think those kind of works can be done on like a regional basis, right? And I think a lot of artists are participating in that by just being artists in some sense and working as bridges to sort of showcase that it is somehow possible to create a visibility, I guess.
Yeah, maybe I should break my question down a bit as well and just ask you, what do you think is your role? Not necessarily fighting against climate change, but your role as an Indigenous artist working on your communities.
Well, that's pretty much what I'm trying to say, is that I'm trying to sort of even start a conversation within two like very distinct ethnic groups for them to start communicating, and for the South to understand the North and for the North to understand the South, and to sort of like show the differences, the cultural differences also, and for them to actually understand that they're sharing one territory, and the ones who live up north, they have less agency, but to gain more agency to speak up and talk about their problems on a regional level at least.
Thank you so much. Niap, do you also want to answer to this more concrete question?
It's the same. I mean, it's the same for me. I'm trying to raise awareness about, first step is to, have people know what's going on in the North, living in Montreal and like southern part of Quebec. I'm trying to get people to acknowledge that we're there and that, we're struggling. It's the first step. And that's what I try to do with my work, is try to be like Svetlana says, like a mediator between the two. But it's a long road, and I'm seeing positive change. I mean, there's a lot of positive change. Like this conversation would have never happened like 20 years ago or 10, 15 years ago. So that's, that's good, slowly.
All right, and I think we're at the end, unfortunately, although I find it so fascinating to talk to the three of you. I feel like I learned so much in this conversation, and thanks for sharing your knowledge and enriching our view of the world and our understanding of climate change and who it's already affecting. And now maybe the two of you also want to stay in this Zoom for a little bit longer, because we have another special guest today, Christo, who's an expert on music from all around the world and is going to play some of it and talk to us about it. So yeah, for the next 15 minutes or so, enjoy. Thank you so much again for joining us today.
Right on. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Singuala, singuala, singuala. Sen mehtabım, güneşim ve her şeyimsin. Dünyada eşi olmayan çiçeğimsin. Benim tatlı esmerimsin. Her zamanki sevincimsin. Singuala, singuala, singuala. Singuala, singuala, singuala. Πες μου ποιο είναι το πικρό παραπονό σου. Αν θα φύγεις δεν θα αντέξω στο χαμό σου. Με λαχρινή ομορφιά μου παντοτινή χαρά μου. Singuala, singuala, singuala. Singuala, singuala, singuala. Dertlerimi yanında unutuyorum. Şu zavallı gönlümü avutuyorum. Sensizim ah ölüyorum. Bana dönmeni bekliyorum. Singuala.
Ja, das war Singuala aus der neuen Risa und Kuba 4 Platte. Dazu muss ich sagen, in den 60er Jahren war der indische und türkische Film sehr populär in Griechenland. Deswegen haben sehr viele Sänger und Komponisten Musik aus diesen Filmen einfach geklaut, mit griechischen Texten versehen und gesagt, das ist mein Lied, und einen Sänger geholt. Und dieses spezielle Singuala war ein Monsterhit, was man heute sagen würde. Und der allergrößte Sänger nach dem Zweiten Weltkrieg aus Griechenland, Stelios Kazantzidis, hatte seinen größten Hit. Und ich kenne das Lied noch aus dem Radio damals. Ich war 6, 7 Jahre alt und es lief dauernd im Radio. Es gab ja außer Radio sowieso nichts. Und diese Platte, das Besondere an dieser Platte ist, das sind türkische und griechische Musiker, die teilweise sogar türkische mit griechischem Hintergrund und Griechen mit türkischem Hintergrund, die lauter nur solche Lieder, Laika-Lieder nennt man das, das ist sozusagen die griechische, sehr populäre Musik der 60er Jahre. Und ich habe auch ein sehr schönes zweites Beispiel aus dieser Platte von der anderen Seite. Und ich finde, das, was diese Platte schafft, sozusagen eine Völkerverständigung, das schaffen 100 Jahre Politik zwischen Griechenland und Türkei nicht. Das schafft nur eine einzige Platte mit diesen tollen Songs. Ja. So, Tamba Tumba heißt es. Ich habe mich damals schon gefragt, was das bedeutet. Das bedeutet nichts. So, jetzt aber.
Tamba tumba, tamba tumba, tamba tumba, tamba tumba, tamba tumba, tamba tumba, tamba tumba, tamba tumba. Karımdan dayak yiyorum, tamba tumba, tamba tumba. Karımdan dayak yiyorum, tamba tumba, tamba tumba. Kılıbık oldum, kepaze oldum. Yapma be kadın diyorum, tamba tumba, tamba tumba. Perişan oldum, divane oldum. Kadına yüz vermemeli, icap ederse dövmeli. Biraz fazla konuşursa anasına göndermeli. Dırdır fazla yaparsa anasına göndermeli. Tamba tumba, tamba tumba, tamba tumba, tamba tumba. Tamba tumba, tamba tumba, tamba tumba, tamba tumba. Σημερώνει και βραδιάζει, τάμπα τούμπα, τάμπα τούμπα. Σημερώνει και βραδιάζει, τάμπα τούμπα, τάμπα τούμπα. Με βαρύ καημό, με βαρύ καημό. Με τα ρούχα της τα βάζει, τάμπα τούμπα, τάμπα τούμπα. Πάω να τρελαθώ, πάω να τρελαθώ. Θα τη διώξω τη ζήλιαρα, θα τη διώξω τη γκρίνιαρα. Θα πετάξω το καπέλο και θα κάνω ό,τι θέλω. Θα πετάξω το καπέλο και θα ζήσω όπως θέλω. Ταμπα τουμπα, ταμπα τουμπα, ταμπα τουμπα, ταμπα τουμπα. Ταμπα τουμπα, ταμπα τουμπα, ταμπα τουμπα, ταμπα τουμπα. yüz vermemeli, icap ederse dövmeli. Biraz fazla konuşursa anasına göndermeli. Dırdır fazla yaparsa anasına göndermeli. Tamba tumba tamba tumba, tamba tumba tamba tumba, tamba tumba tamba tumba, tamba tumba tamba tumba, tamba tumba tamba.
So, unglaubliche Musik auf eine Platte des Berliner Labels Habibi Funk, also nicht Habibi Goethe, sondern Habibi Funk aus Algerien. Maciej Sula heißt der Künstler, Sänger, Musiker, ganz großer Star dort. Das unglaubliche Winteranfang liegt auf dem Plattenteller. kleiner Sprung nach Ägypten. Hani Mehana, Doppelalbum, eine Compilation an reine Instrumentals aus Filmen und Fernsehserien aus Ägypten. Kenne mich nicht so gut aus, aber die Musik ist fantastisch. Das Album heißt Music for Aeroplanes, wieso auch immer, hört sich aber so unglaublich an. So wunderbar kann es sein. Music for Aeroplanes, machen einen Sprung in die Karibik via England. Die älteste Steelband der Welt, Ebony Steelband, ist 50 geworden, hat sich selber ein Geschenk gemacht, da sie Kraftwerk-Fans sind oder waren, haben das kompletten Kraftwerk-Album Man Machine auf Steeldrum nachgespielt und nennen sich oder das Album Pan Machine, logischerweise. Und wir hören hier The Model. So, ja, 1970 musste der brasilianische Musiker und Schriftsteller Circumpolar aus politischen Gründen sein Land verlassen und landete in Italien, da er ja als Kind dort schon mal gelebt hat, weil seine Eltern Diplomaten waren, und hatte eine sensationelle Platte mit Ennio Morricone gemacht. Das ist ein treffende Giganten, sage ich immer, Circumpolar und Morricone. Und dieses tolle Album, was total selten im Original ist und sehr teuer, gibt es wieder in eine sehr schöne, billige Ausgabe für alle Fans. Und kann man die ganze Platte eigentlich durchhören, aber der Eröffner ist schon wieder richtig großartig.
A volte un ragazzo si sente come uno che parte o che muore e scopre che non conta niente, che il mondo è più grande di un cuore. Nel cuore il ragazzo coltiva la rosa più bella che c'è, ma attento che la rotativa si porta la rosa con sé. Rotativa, ruota gigante, ruota motore, ruota che fa un'ora, un minuto, un istante, ti butta di qua poi di là. Un uomo va controcorrente con tutto il coraggio che può, ma un giorno si stanca e comprende che il fiume è più forte, però vorrebbe trovare la riva e farsi lasciare dov'è. Ma attento che la rotativa si porta la riva con sé. Rotativa, ruota gigante, ruota motore, ruota che va un'ora, un minuto, un istante, ti butta di qua poi di là. A volte la gente protesta e scende per strada a cantare. È come vedere una festa, il popolo intero che va. La rabbia non alternativa, laddove l'amore non c'è. Ma attenti che la rotativa si porta la rabbia con sé. Rotativa, ruota gigante, ruota motore, ruota che va un'ora, un minuto, un istante, ti butta di qua poi di là. La rosa all'arriva alla rabbia, volarono al vento così. Son come castelli di sabbia che ognuno di noi costruì. E mentre si va alla deriva ci resta un ricordo finché non cade nella rotativa che porta il ricordo con sé.